Hello, everybody. It is absolutely great to see you. In my last video, I said that I had taken the leap into astrophotography as a way of coping with decreased mobility. So today, I'm a deep sky astrophotographer taking long exposure photographs of objects in the night sky, objects that you generally cannot see with the naked eye. This video today is about 5 key lessons that I've learned in the first 22 months of this hobby. These aren't how-to lessons, but rather they talk about 3 general themes. 1, how much I had to do to get my first deep sky image. 2, how much you should rely on the experts for help. And 3, the practical challenges of shooting from a Bortle 6 residential subdivision driveway. There are chapter markers in the description if you're interested in a specific topic. But before we get there, the usual ask that you click that subscribe button. I want to give you as much useful content as possible, and a sub is the best way of telling me that I'm doing that. Please, thank you very much. Also, please check out my website for all my images and also for, if I do say so myself, some great blog content too. All right, let's get started. Lesson 1 is about learning basic concepts. So, you've decided that you're going to take up astrophotography. Where do you actually start? Well, YouTube is your friend, of course. Everything is here, from deep sky astro with a DSLR to setting up a fully equipped permanent observatory in your backyard. Everything from using automated spreadsheets to drive your camera to using full, free, or paid software packages like Backyard EOS, SharpCat, Nina, my namesake, Cyril, and PixInsight. But there is so much information that it can be overwhelming. So I bit this off in chunks. I first took a look at a basic astronomy course to learn about the night sky, to learn about the objects in the night sky, the location of those objects visually, and what you could expect to see visually and photograph. That helped me isolate the type of photography that I was most interested in. In my case, my interests lie in solar, nebulae, and galaxy photography, but not so much in planetary observation or imaging. Next, I learned about some basic practices in good deep sky imaging. Things like the importance of polar alignment, Bortle class categories, light pollution, seeing conditions, the benefits of auto-guiding. I also learned about the evolution of deep sky imaging, the types of cameras that have been today and that have been available and are today available, along with telescopes and mounts used in the past and what was available today. So lesson 2 is about selecting the right equipment for you. One key learning for me was about the evolution of electronically assisted astronomy, or EAA, which was initially the simple addition of digital video cameras to the end of the telescope to allow for real-time viewing of objects on a separate screen, instead of looking through the eyepiece. It has naturally evolved into full electronic ecosystems of components all working together to recommend, locate, center, track, and view objects using laptops or tablets or even smartphones. Purists say that imaging for later processing is not part of EAA, but I say potato, since live stacking for immediate viewing is considered part of EAA, as is the application of dark calibration frames. But I digress. The point is that technology is assisting you, and that technology has improved exponentially over the last decade. That said, there seems to be strong opinions on 2 key topics in today's astrophotography, namely the use of equipment ecosystems and the role of automation. Equipment ecosystems refer to using only one brand of equipment, and the limitations one brand may place on connecting with other brands. Personally, I welcome the option to be locked in, as I can expect seamless integration out of the box of my many components. But many experts have absolutely no interest in this and love to tinker with their rigs. That definitely is not me. The same point applies to automation. Most functions in astrophotography today at the consumer level are automated and are driven by apps. But I've found that many experts don't trust the automation and often need to replace it with a method that they can objectively verify. Some say, even go so far as to say, that automation has ruined the hobby. Well, luckily, a few select folks are of the opposite point of view, that automation plays an ever-increasing role and should be embraced. In my quest, I specifically looked for equipment that could essentially partner with me, to the point of even offering suggestions for targets and for appropriate imaging sequences. That's exactly what I did find. Alrighty, so off I went to Ontario Telescope and I asked Steve Malia, the owner, one simple question. If you were to build an integrated astrophotography rig using today's modern equipment for a beginner astrophotographer like me, what would you build? What would you suggest I leave the store with today? I left that day with the following: an Ascar FRA 300 quintuplet flat field Petzval astrograph. This is a 60 millimeter refractor. It offers no accessory reducers that you need to fiddle with, and also has no precise back focus requirements. Back focus is one of the things that beginners often struggle with, and this had a range of values that you could work within rather than a precise 55 millimeter back focus requirement. Yay! A ZWO ASI Air Plus to automate my imaging sessions, a ZWO electronic focuser to automate my focusing runs, a ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro one-shot color camera with reasonable sized pixels that would allow me to use it on multiple telescopes of multiple focal lengths, and one-shot color makes it convenient to use as well for a beginner. A ZWO 2-inch filter drawer to allow quick changeouts of filters. An Optolong L Pro 2-inch filter, good for multiband imaging in my light-polluted Bortle 6 skies. A ZWO ASI 120mm guide camera, and a ZWO 30f4 guide scope. Both of the latter two are light enough to sit very nicely on top of my FRA 300 scope. Now, at the time, ZWO didn't offer any of the mounts that it currently offers today. So I left the store that day with an Explorer Scientific IEXOS 100 German equatorial mount. This was a cost-effective option for me and could also be fully controlled by the ASI Air Plus. That was a requirement. But do you sense a theme throughout all of this? I'm going for the integrated ecosystem, not the separate components that I can mix and match just because of budget. Although budget's important, it wasn't the only consideration for me. I have since replaced that IEXOS mount with a ZWO AM3 harmonic drive mount, for the simple reason that it integrates more seamlessly with the rest of my ZWO ecosystem, and it also provides 80% better guiding and tracking than my Explorer Scientific mount. I've also added a ZWO electronic filter wheel, which you might think is an odd addition for a one-shot color setup. But in fact, in today's environment, multiband imaging imaging with multiband filters and dual band filters is becoming very popular. So the ability to switch between one or another of the multiple offerings that exist out there gives you much more versatility in terms of the different objects in the night sky that you might be interested in. I've also added additional filters, a Deep Sky DAD flat panel that you can see on the rig behind me, and a Pegasus Astro power box. That might too seem an odd addition for a rig that's powered by the ASI Air Plus. Well, I discovered along the way that there is some software that I could swear is named after me called NINA, Nighttime Imaging and Astronomy, that allows full control of your astronomy rig from a portable laptop computer. And I wanted to give it a try. I had to give it a try, especially since it was named after me. So I can, by adding the Pegasus Astro Power Box, simply remove one cable from the ASI Air Plus and connect that one cable to my computer for full control of my scope. Again, in keeping with that theme of convenience and ease of use. I also now have added a second scope to my collection, an ASCAR 103 APO with a 700 millimeter focal length. It meets all of the criteria that I've talked about here and the criteria that I've mentioned before, that I will stay under 1,000 millimeters of focal length to facilitate both portability and ease of use, and also give me access to the multitude of objects that perhaps I wouldn't have access to at all with a shorter focal length scope. One other decision I made early on was that I did not want to spend a lot of time assembling and disassembling everything every time I use the equipment. It's great to have cases and boxes and cases and boxes to store the scope, the cameras, the accessories, and all of the multitude of cables. But I actually loathe the task of connecting and disconnecting all the parts, especially since there are so many cables. Frankly, it's easy for me as a senior citizen to get a cable mixed up, to forget to put a cable on, or to disconnect a cable and just ignore it going forward and try to do an imaging run without it. So, to get me away from that problem, and again, keeping in this theme of convenience, each scope now has its own complete set of accessories. Its own camera, its own filter wheel, its own EAF, its own power box, its own flat panel, and yes, its own ASI Air Plus. I have two of them now. And I never completely take anything apart anymore. The only disassembly I do is to lift up and remove the entire imaging rig from the mount when I want to, for any reason, travel to a different location or put it away because I'm not going to be using it for a while. The entire imaging rig is placed intact in a padded bag, which I have sitting on the ground here, to be able to transport it safely when I need to do that. And inside the bag is a simple set of moving blankets that wrap securely around the imaging rig and give it enough padded protection to allow me to transport it safely. But nothing is detached, other than the two cables that allow me to connect the rig to the mount to begin with. The mount itself is light enough to carry with one hand. It comes apart in 3 pieces and can be easily stored for transport. Again, the theme of convenience is paramount. So, what's my message? As a beginner, you do have to make some decisions on the direction that you will take in the hobby and how you will equip yourself to do so. You have to decide what you can live with and what you can't. I decided that I could live with less focal length and resolution. Of course, budget comes into play, but luckily there are choices that can fit any budget. All right, lesson 3, guidance from the experts. It's absolutely amazing to me just how many people are in this hobby. It's equally amazing to me to see the span of backgrounds, knowledge, smarts, and even free content offered by the people in this hobby. People that have decades of experience, people with advanced degrees, high-level technology jobs, or research positions. I admire them all, but while decades of experience are invaluable in being efficient and effective in a particular set of methods, I've interestingly found that these experts are not always familiar with the latest methods, and that they rely a lot on their own manual efforts and their very smart brains to manage their equipment and to manage their results. They call themselves control freaks. They want control of everything. They enjoy problem solving and tweaking and tinkering. Well, as I've already said, I don't. I do consider myself a smart person. I'm comfortable with most technology. But at this stage of my life, I'm seeking and limiting myself to only as much information as I need to have a working understanding of a component or process, just enough to employ it correctly. For example, I don't need to internalize the bandwidths of every filter I use. I just need to know what filters and exposure lengths work best for different objects. I don't need to know the over and under sampling resolution in arc seconds per pixel of my camera and scope combination. I just need to know if the image will be acceptably resolved for an average amateur astrophotographer like me who displays their images on a website or on Instagram. And while it's helpful to understand ADU for flat frames, I would rather have Nina the software just take over this function for Nina the astrophotographer through its flat wizard function and tell me exactly what those values should be. All that said, if you are a novice astrophotographer like me, here are the experts that I've come to rely on for meaningful information at just the perfect level of detail for my needs. Sean Nielsen of Visible Dark, and he's a Canadian like me. Luke Newbold of Leukomatico for his teasing apart of different techniques with test data. Nico Carver from Nebula Photos for all of his stuff, but most especially for demonstrating the quality of the result that you can achieve with the most basic equipment. Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard, again, for all his stuff, but especially for his guidebooks and instructional posts that are written with the beginner hobbyist in mind. And lastly, a new discovery, Tony from Hidden Light Photography, who takes all of the important imaging concepts and distills them down into understandable, repeatable elements. Just technical enough to be interesting without overwhelming us in the science and the data. His channel is growing by leaps and bounds. Definitely recommend checking him out. All right, lesson 4. A little bit of an extension of lesson 3. It's about dealing with contrary views. One of the bigger issues with expert opinions are the contrary views that you might run into and how to make sense of them. As an example, recent posts by one of the experts that I follow, Leukomatico, showed that short exposures and long exposures in light-polluted skies did not have the expected whopping difference in resolution and detail. Short exposures of 1 minute with equal total integration time as long exposures of 5 minutes with today's modern scopes, cameras, and filters provided almost indistinguishable results. The conventional wisdom up until now, which I have followed within the limits of accommodating my light pollution skies, has been that longer exposures provide more detail, even with the same integration time. It seems that's not so. So there is a point of diminishing returns. You really need to try things out for yourself and see what works in your situation. And because we are all human, personal biases sometimes do come into play in any guidance received from the experts. Again, this is back to advocating what you're familiar with and used to and how long you've been doing it that way. Or it may be about your personal philosophy of not buying into, for example, one ecosystem and your love of tinkering to make things work together. I don't participate in chat groups or forums like Cloudy Nights or Astrobin for that reason. You may disagree, but I've found more conflicting information on those forums than I have the time or frankly the patience to sort through. The bottom line, I've assembled a 30-page personal manual of all the information I need to image and process my deep sky photographs to my own liking. As a new, more valid way of doing things emerges and I test it myself, that section in the manual gets updated. And I'm now able to easily subscribe or pass by any experts that I might encounter. It's important that you're able to do that too. Not all experts will have information that's relevant to your needs. It's okay to be picky. All right, I'd like to close with some practical tips about shooting from a light polluted residential subdivision. My situation is very different from imaging in a quiet, dark sky location where you can set up the scope and possibly even leave it in place for the entire night or even permanently. I can't. My imaging sessions run 3 to 4 hours at most. I live in a typical residential subdivision here in Canada. I made the mistake of planting loads of what would become tall trees when I moved in, so I have access to the south and to the west only from the front of the house, closest to the street. All of the houses around me also typically have their porch lights on at night, and of course, there are street lights aplenty. I have 3 separate spots on the driveway that work for different directions of objects, and each is marked with tripod positions. I was initially told that my tripod had to be rock solid and stuck in the ground, and there's a lot of discourse online about concrete piers, but I've actually found that I could place my entire rig on a set of roller wheels and roll it into position from the garage. The wheels stay on the tripod and they lock for stability, and I image perfectly well this way. Even for reslewing for multiple objects or for meridian flips, I have absolutely no scope movement problems. Even cars driving by close to my rig don't affect my image capture. All of this may be because I'm using essentially wide field scopes. Remember, the more magnification you use or have, the more these issues might come into play for you. That's why I decided to limit my magnification to below 1000 millimeters. In terms of dealing with light pollution, I have 2 strategies. I have a minimum elevation above the horizon, and I use filters on the camera. I'm able to image extremely well with objects that are 40 degrees or more above the horizon. Any lower and ambient light creates prominent gradients. So I select objects accordingly for each imaging session. Modern software gives you trajectories, elevations, as well as brightness and location to make it easy to make up your plan for the evening. You can even include custom horizons in the software to fully model your specific lines of sight. The software even provides recommendations based on your location, your camera, and your scope parameters. Also, a whole new generation of multi-band and dual-band filters has emerged for one-shot color. I have Optilong filters, L Pro, L Enhance, L Quad, and L Ultimate. I do find that they make a difference for me. With all of these elements included, I'm surprised how agnostic my imaging is to ambient light. I've had a neighbor's car headlight shining directly at my scope, but because it was elevated for 70 degrees at the time, there was no discernible impact on the final image. Here's another thing. If you can't leave your rig unattended, you do need a plan to keep yourself warm and cool, warm or cool, and entertained for the time that you are out with the rig. While the rig is on the driveway, I'm in the garage, listening to music, watching videos, or reading with the rig visible just outside. But this is a real challenge when the temperature is extreme. I now have heated clothing for the winter and a powerful fan for the summer. I must say that I really underestimated the challenge of long nights with the rig. So, give some thought to that, on how you're going to manage that if you can't set up your rig and leave it. I do have some sky access to the east in the backyard, hidden behind locked gates. So occasionally I will haul everything out there so that I can set it up, leave it, and monitor activity from inside the house. That is a much better option in below freezing temperatures or when the mosquitoes are thick in the summer. And maybe that's my last tip. You need to balance long imaging nights with the daytime obligations that you might have the next day. One of the benefits of increasing automation is the ability to set up your session, launch it at dusk, and let it run all night on its own. If you've configured your equipment and cables correctly, if you have batteries to keep things running that long, if you can manage the temperature, the dew, and the elements, and if you have the right computer control equipment, you can sleep very soundly while your rig does its work. But don't forget to really check the weather forecast before you let the rig out of your sight overnight. And as a last point, don't forget to just spend some time looking up at the night sky too. That on its own is very, very good for the soul. I hope this has been useful. Please let me know by hitting that button and leaving a comment. Like and subscribe. Let me know what decisions you've made to get yourself situated in this hobby. And thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all very, very much.